Good morning. This is Rav Shira for Nar Shalom and the Chabura. I've been asked to comment on the very difficult situation happening in Paris today and yesterday, and the difficulties, the suffering, the pain that many people feel all over the world. This is a very sensitive subject, what has happened, from many different positions, from many different perspectives. Now, I entitled this little talk we're going to have this morning, "Who Won the Crusades?" And I hope my words enter your heart because they've come from my heart. I'm not reading from a text. I'm answering those who have asked me what I think about what happened to the Notre Dame Cathedral. But who won the Crusades? The Christians, the Muslims, or the Jews? We know the last Crusader king was King Louis IX, who was sainted by the Vatican after he passed away. And he is the famous Saint Louis. Cities have been named after him, even baseball teams. Well, it's interesting, they're called the Cardinals. There's a few Cardinals, a whole college of them actually, in Rome. But nonetheless, who was King Louis IX? Well, he's called the last Crusader because he took an army to the Middle East and he killed a lot of people, Muslims and Jews, and probably anybody else who might have gotten in his way. In Jewish history, we know he also sponsored a debate between Jews and Catholics, and he put the Talmud on trial. And in this debate, who could win? Well, we know who won. The Catholics won, the Jews were demeaned, and the Talmud was burned. 2 years after the debate, over 10,000 handwritten scrolls of Talmud were burned right around the corner from Notre Dame Cathedral. Is that the behavior of a saint? And what kind of church makes a murderer a saint? Now we know the history of Muhammad's conquests, his forced conversions, his serial murder.
They're closing the internet for a few minutes, that's okay?
It's all clearly documented. You can go on YouTube and find this information from accepted professors from universities around the world. Now, what kind of religion of God finds glory in murder? Who wants a religion like that? And perhaps a more difficult question: who follows such a religion? You? Me? Our Christian brothers? Our Muslim brothers? I think the answer is people who don't know. They're innocent or ignorant, or people who don't want to know. Which are we? Now, after 2,000 years of the Jewish exile, where the Jews have roamed this planet in probably the most miserable conditions ever known, who've lifted themselves up in every empire through hard work, through modesty, through difficulty, through oppression, through persecution, through mass theft, and of course, a few pogroms and holocausts along the way. But let's ask our question again. Who won the Crusades? Who is the sovereign of the Eretz Israel today? Who has authority over the Holy Land today? And who is learning the burnt Talmud today more than ever? And who is distributing charity on every street corner in this country? And who is building synagogues on every corner in this country? Who won the Crusades? To take advantage of a situation that was given to them by the United Nations. Who is the nation that per capita is sending more help to the grief-stricken nations of the world who've been hit by hurricanes and tsunamis and earthquakes overnight? Now, we know the United Nations mandated 2 countries in Palestine in 1948. Why didn't the Arabs take what was offered to them, just like the Jews did? The Arabs would have had what they wanted, a 2-state solution. But they didn't take the gracious offer. They waged war. And it's interesting that it wasn't one Arab nation. It was a combination, 5 or 6 nations. Suddenly, all the Arabs were one nation. The Jews graciously accepted the offer and turned a desert wasteland into a flowering garden. A beautiful place to live, to work, to raise your families, to be good people. And since 1948, well, unfortunately, the record speaks for itself, what the Arabs have done here. Why does nobody talk about this in the United Nations? The United Nations are the ones who gave us the land. The United Nations tried to give the Arabs the land, but no one mentions that in the United Nations. The Arabs turned down the gift in a very reprehensible way. But they don't talk about that there. So where's the truth? And how does a God-fearing, God-loving Jew respond to the terrible suffering that people feel in the world? Whether it's the church of Notre Dame burning or 10,000 Chinese people drowning in a flood. The Chafetz Chaim was once asked, first he was told that there was a great flood in China and many people died and many towns were wiped out. And he was asked, Rebbe, how do we respond? And the Rebbe said, we must pray. And the, let's call him innocent student, asked the Rebbe, why should we pray? There's no Jews in China. And he said, we're not praying because there's Jews or not Jews in China. We're praying because people are suffering. We're praying because there is a concept of judgment in the world that human beings are forced to stand up to. And we know, we are taught by our masters that that judgment is brought into the world because of our behavior, collectively and individually. And there's no such thing as being a collective when I want to be collective and being an individual when I want to be an individual. You know, the Russian system is built on collectivity and communist consciousness. The American system is built on the sacred nature of the individual. But you can't have one or the other. In Judaism, we have both personal responsibility and collective responsibility. And if you try to separate them, you produce things like communism that kills a lot of people, or you produce decadence like we see in a lot of, unfortunately, places that used to be wonderful to live in, like the United States. If you exaggerate individual responsibility, you create the idea of I can say whatever I want to say to whoever I want to say, and I can be whatever sex I want to be, and I can hurt whoever say whatever I want to say in public. That's the exaggeration of individual rights. And of course, collective rights, that produces lots of purges, let's say, that they've been carried out in places like the former Soviet Union. So where's the truth? Does it matter if it's a French Catholic crusader or an Egyptian pharaoh or a German dictator? Or does it matter if it was an Egyptian bourgeoisie that the KGB trained and wrote him a false passport and said he was Israeli, Palestinian, and turned him into the creator of the Palestinian Authority, Yamak Arafat? Does it really matter who it is? If a mosque is burned down, do people cry? What this all proves, my friends, why the whole world is fighting over Jerusalem and the Holy Land is because it is the Holy Land. Because the people who have educated themselves and learnt history know that there's something extremely precious in Eretz Israel and in the holy city of Jerusalem. And the reason that they're fighting over Jerusalem is because they know it's the true center of the universe. And it's the true place where God reveals himself most readily. Now, God can reveal himself to you on the Arctic Circle or in a jungle in South America. But the place that has the reputation as God's house and his dwelling place is just down the road in the middle of the Silwan Valley, Jerusalem, the Holy Mountain, etc. Okay. Why is this so important? Why is everybody fighting over Jerusalem? It's a small city. Okay, there's a lot of historical places here. There's some wonderful places to see. There's graves of great people. There's wonderful architecture. Why is everybody fighting over Jerusalem? Because it's the holy city? Well, the people fighting over the holy city don't appear to be very holy to me when they name and they support religions that support murder. So why are they fighting? Because people know Jerusalem is our only hope for peace, true peace. The word Jerusalem means Yiru Shalem, Yiru Shalom. We will see peace. And Jerusalem, as the symbol of true peace, is the true hope of humanity for peace. And I'm afraid, though it might hurt, a lot of people, and I don't want to hurt people. There's been enough pain caused by people towards people. But I'm afraid the church in Rome and a church in Paris and a church in New York City, they're not the symbols of peace. I'm sure any Parisian looks to that cathedral as a symbol of many things, of French pride, French architecture, French ingenuity, but it's not a symbol of peace. And the only hope for humanity to achieve true peace is taking responsibility for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for our nations, and for our race. Only by taking responsibility can we even achieve a part of our potential as being made in the image of God. And this goes true for Christians and Jews and Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and Sikhs and atheists as well. I don't care if you don't believe in God, that's your business. But we still have to take responsibility for ourselves. And that's individual and collective, as I said before. And I'm afraid the jihad terrorists are masters of knowing when to take individual responsibility and when to take collective responsibility, and whenever it suits them. And we see it in the Bible in the name of Avimelech, Melech Gerar, who said to Isaac, I didn't know those people were filling your wells with dirt to cut off your water supply, which ultimately is an act of murder in the ancient world. I didn't know those people. That's the king not taking responsibility for the collective. And where were the guys who actually filled the wells? They could have stood up and said, I'm sorry, Isaac, I did it. I filled your well so your children won't have water. No, there's no such thing as splitting responsibility. We are one race and we are one collective, and we are individuals, and we need to do both. And we have to take responsibility for what we're done. Now, people asked me in the synagogue yesterday, Avraham, what's going to be in Paris, that great cathedral? I said, don't worry, they're going to rebuild it faster and better and more beautiful than it was before. That's a building, my friends. That's a building. A building is not worth one human life in God's eyes. A building can be rebuilt. A human being cannot. So you see, we've got some problems with our priorities as a collective. Individually, we have to answer that question for ourselves. And we have to understand the Bible that most of the religions acknowledge, even if they want to turn it around in a few phrases, that really it wasn't Isaac on the altar, it was Muhammad. And the Christians, they have their version of the Messiah, and they want to turn a few verses to prove that JC was the man. Okay, fine. They want to twist it for their purposes. We know about those purposes. We know about how to use religion to raise a lot of money and armies and power. Okay, fine. It's part of the nature of human beings, is to take advantage of situations. Unfortunately, it's usually a few people that have that power to take advantage of those situations. But the mass of humanity, I believe, are good people. The masses of your friends and your families are good people that want goodness. But you got a few people on top with a lot of power. I guess they're bored. But really, they're just trying to protect their position. But the Bible teaches us that the first This is a good one, folks. The first speaking man was Adam, the man who had a divine soul that could affect the world. In Kabbalah, we do believe in pre-Adamic races. We can look it up in Rabbi Kaplan's books and in other locations. We believe that there were human noids, if you will, not androids. There were humanoids before Adam, but Adam was the first man given the power of divine speech to change the world through his speech. And that's how everything gets done in this world, is through speech. And every politician knows it, and we better learn it ourselves. Now, this first man, who was made in God's image, he wasn't Christian, he wasn't Muslim, and I hate to say it, but I don't think he was Jewish, because there was no religions then. It was just one man and one God having a discussion. And God said, don't eat from that tree. That's the tree of duality consciousness. It's not an apple. The Gemara says it's 7 different fruits that correspond to 7 lower sphirot, spiritual realms in your soul. It's not an apple, and it's not in Silicon Valley with a bite taken out of it. It's duality consciousness that we bit into, that we don't see the oneness anymore. We see everything in pairs. Good and evil, right and wrong, holy and unholy. Well, we need these concepts now that we're here, but let's understand where we come from. We come from the place of unity consciousness. Every human being has that place inside him, but it's so deep, it's so hard to reach. Most of us give up, unfortunately. Most of us, but not all of us. Now, Adam was the first human, and he fell. He fell from the unity consciousness and the place where that existed, which we call the Garden of Eden. He fell from there. And why did he fall? Because he ate? No. He fell because he blamed his wife. He refused to take responsibility. All Adam had to do was say, God, I'm sorry, I ate. But Adam said, no, the woman you gave me, she made me eat. And then God turned to Eve, and Eve said, oh, no, that snake you gave me, he made me eat. Do we see why responsibility is so integral to being a human being? Now, interestingly, in the story, the snake, God doesn't even ask him. He just slithers off into our souls. He slithers off into history to test us. Every one of us, every one of the billions of people that have been on this earth since the beginning. This snake slithered into our soul to test us, and we don't like it, but we're more powerful than he is when we're attached to the oneness. And all Adam had to do was say, God, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have eaten from that consciousness. And same thing with Eve. All she had to do was say, I know I listened to that snake. I shouldn't have. That's tshuva. That's all it is. I don't have to afflict myself like some people do in religion, especially in the Middle Ages. People like King Louis IX, who was known as an ascetic, who was known as they don't call him a Jew hater in history, they call him a Judaism hater, because he felt that the way to make Catholicism strong was to convert Jews, because that's going to convince the Christians that their religion is right, and that's going to convince the Jews that their religion is wrong. So you see, the Catholic agenda of converting Jews is built out of their own insecurity of their religion. If I have security in myself, I don't need to convert you. If I have security in who I am, why do I want to make you like me? You're beautiful the way you are. But unfortunately, it's not so simple. Now, what's the point of all of this? is that God created us in his image, and he wants us to return to that image of the oneness with creation, the oneness with nature, the oneness with each other, the oneness with heaven, the oneness of the past and the present and the future, the unity of time. But the only way we can do it is by taking responsibility for myself, for what I've done that's wrong. And I don't point the finger at anybody, because once I do, you know what? I'm playing God. And you know, playing God is not a good part to take in any movie. Unless maybe you're George Burns or that other actor that played God, you know. We don't want to play God. And when we judge others and we point the finger of blame at others, we're playing God. And that's why in the 613 commandments of the Rambam, it says it's forbidden to make yourself into the image of God. That's what it means. How do you make yourself into the image of the imageless, of the eternal and the infinite? There's a guy riding a white donkey around Jerusalem, and he's got a sign on as he's riding around in his donkey. It says, "I am the Messiah of the Jews that you've been waiting for." And I'm like, okay, look, can you show me something else besides a sign and a white donkey? If you are, show me. But don't play God. It's a very bad part. Let's take responsibility for ourselves, and let's make peace not a slogan. Because right now, peace is a political slogan, and it's been used this way for decades. And peace is the real opioid of the masses. Marx got it wrong. Religion isn't the opiate of the masses, it's the only hope left. But as long as they're talking peace and waging war, I don't really want to buy that peace, do I? And the real beauty is that if we could take this opioid and turn it and take responsibility, we'll turn it into the elixir of life for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren, for the rest of human history. And that's who we were created to be, my friends. And that's our only hope. So we've got to get a little bit smarter, a little bit sharper, a little more honest, and take responsibility. And when we do, you'll see a great burden is lifted off our heart. The minute I take responsibility, and that's what Jewish repentance is about, what we call teshuvah, to return to my divine image means I take responsibility. And I fix the sin of the first divine man. So I hope this was useful and helpful. And I want to bless everyone to take these words to heart and not to rejoice in the burning of a cathedral like a lot of people unfortunately are, and not to point the finger of blame. And if we do, as a collective, then we'll experience true individual freedom. And then when we take true individual responsibility, then as a collective, everyone prospers, everyone receives the gifts that God wants to give us. So here we are a few days before Pesach. Of course, normally we learn the Talmud here on the Chabura. But today I felt compelled. What can I tell you? So we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and go back to the Talmud. And we're going to continue winning the Crusades. Because it's not our fight, friends, it's God's fight. And we were chosen to be part of the participants in the war for truth and goodness, and to bring the divine presence back into human life. We'll see you in a little while.